November 18, 1942. Henderson Field, Guadalcanal. The air felt thick, sticky, everything covered in that relentless morning humidity. 16 Lockheed P-38 Lightnings from a 339 Fighter Squadron touched down, wheels rattling on the steel matting. Hiding just beyond the field, Japanese spotters watched from the jungle and radioed their reports back to Rabaul, barely able to hold back their laughter. These weren't the sleek American fighters they'd pictured, not the nimble machines that might dare to challenge the Zero's reign in the skies. Instead, they saw big, heavy, twin-engine beasts with those odd double tails, planes that seemed to break every rule of air combat the Japanese thought they understood. To eyes trained on the clean, stripped-down lines of the Mitsubishi A6M0, the P-38 looked all wrong. Too heavy, too complicated, too much. Just like the Americans themselves, the Japanese thought. The Zero was all about simplicity, every ounce of fat trimmed away, every part pared down to the minimum, built for ultimate agility. The Americans? They'd gone the other way. More engines, more weight, more complexity. Back at Rabaul, the Navy's 11th Air Fleet headquarters read the reports and felt vindicated. This just proved what they believed since Pearl Harbor. Americans relied on gadgets and numbers because they lacked the fighting spirit that made Japanese pilots unbeatable. Nobody there had a clue that this moment would flip everything upside down. In just 5 months, one mission would shatter all their assumptions about American air power. The rules of aerial supremacy were about to change. Not in the usual swirling dogfights, but in a new kind of war the Japanese hadn't even imagined. Long-range precision attacks, the kind that would eventually take out their most irreplaceable asset, their confidence. That smug attitude had started back in August, when Japanese intelligence first spotted these strange new fighters in the Aleutian Islands. On August 9th, 2 P-38s from the 343rd Fighter Group shot down a pair of Japanese Kawanishi H-6K flying boats, the first Japanese planes ever lost to Lightnings. But that skirmish in the foggy Aleutians felt distant, almost meaningless to the real fight raging farther south. The first intelligence reports, sent around to fighter units in September, dripped with overconfidence. The Americans, they said, had built these twin-engine monsters out of some obsession with mechanical complexity. The reports predicted the Lightnings would be outclassed by Japanese fighters in any real dogfight. Commander Minoru Genda, the tactical mastermind behind Pearl Harbor, read those reports. His take was blunt. The Americans, having failed to match our Zero with conventional fighters, now resort to unconventional designs. Every extra part is just another thing that can break. For Genda and his peers, the Zero was the ultimate expression of their philosophy. Maximum results from minimum material. The P-38? It looked like the opposite. Early encounters seemed to prove the Japanese right. When P-38 showed up over Guadalcanal in November, Japanese pilots noticed they didn't want to tangle in turning fights. To them, it looked like fear, not tactics. The first hint that maybe, just maybe, they were missing something. On November 18th, the P-38s of the 339th Fighter Squadron flew their first combat mission over Guadalcanal, escorting B-17 bombers. They claimed 3 Japanese planes shot down. Not a huge number, but something was different. The P-38s refused to get drawn into the usual swirling dogfights. Instead, they dove in from high altitude, made lightning-fast attacks, and climbed away before anyone could react. But it was December 27, 1942, that really rattled the Japanese. 12 P-38s from the 39th Fighter Squadron met a Japanese force over Dobadura, New Guinea. It was quick. The Lightnings kept their height and refused to turn with the enemy. They shot down several Japanese planes and barely took any losses themselves. After the war, captured diaries from Japan's 4th Air Group told a story from the other side. December 1942, the twin-engine fighters appear above our bases at heights we can't reach. When we climb to meet them, they dive through our formations at incredible speed, fire, and climb away before we can react. The old tactics just didn't work. The Zero's legendary agility, which had crushed every rival since China, suddenly meant nothing against an enemy that never stuck around to turn. Still, Japanese intelligence clung to their old assumptions. In January 1943, their updated P-38 assessment showed the same dangerous underestimation. They just couldn't see what was coming. The report sent out to all fighter units pulled no punches. The Lougheed twin-engine fighter shows off American industry more than real combat power. Top speed, maybe 350 miles per hour. Ceiling, around 30,000 feet. Range, 500 or 600 miles. Nose-mounted machine guns. Heavy and complicated. Easy pickings for our fighters if we get up close. Get in tight, that's where we win. But reality, it turned out, wasn't anything like that. When the P-38G started showing up in the Pacific, it could hit 400 miles per hour in level flight and climb to 40,000 feet. With drop tanks, it flew over 1,000 miles, double what the old report guessed. The nose packed a punch. For .50 caliber machine guns plus a 20 millimeters cannon, all firing straight ahead. By January 1943, American pilots weren't just impressed. They were building new tactics around the P-38 strengths. Major John Mitchell, who would go on to lead the mission to take down Yamamoto, was already working with the 339th Fighter Squadron, sharpening these tactics. Their golden rule was simple. Never give up your energy advantage or get sucked into a turning fight with Japanese planes. Then came the Battle of the Bismarck Sea, March 2nd to 4th, 1943. That fight should have shaken Japanese confidence to the core. P-38s flew high cover while American and Australian bombers tore apart a Japanese convoy headed for Lae. 8 transports and 4 destroyers went down. P-38 pilots racked up kills and kept the bombers safe. Japanese survivors later remembered the P-38 circling way up, out of reach, while the Zero escort struggled just to climb that high. When the Japanese fighters did finally make altitude, they were worn out and at a huge disadvantage. Still, Japanese reports shrugged off the disaster, blaming surprise and being outnumbered, never really admitting American planes and tactics were better. That kind of denial stuck around for too long. April 1st, 1943. Operation IGO. Admiral Yamamoto himself launched a massive air counterattack from Rabaul, aiming to smash American air power in the Solomons and remind everyone who was in charge. The reports that came back to Japanese high command painted a fantasy. Dozens of American planes shot down, ships sunk left and right. In truth, American losses barely registered, while Japanese losses, many thanks to P-38s, were heavy. This false sense of victory convinced Yamamoto it was safe to do an inspection tour of forward bases, putting him right in the path of the American P-38s based on Guadalcanal. April 13, 1943. U.S. radio operators intercepted a Japanese Navy message, encrypted in JN-25D. After hours of code breaking in Pearl Harbor, they pieced together Yamamoto's exact travel plans for April 18th. He'd leave Rabaul at 0600 in a medium bomber with 6 fighter escorts, hitting several bases on a tight schedule. The intelligence went straight to Admiral Nimitz, who decided to try for an interception. Only one plane could pull it off, the P-38 Lightning. The ambush spot will be 400 miles from Guadalcanal, right at the edge of the P-38's range, even with extra fuel tanks. April 17th. Major John Mitchell of the 339th Fighter Squadron got the job of planning the intercept. He mapped out a 600-mile route that hugged the ocean at wave-top height, steering clear of Japanese outposts and coast watchers. 18 P-38s would fly, for as a killer flight to hit the bombers, 12 as top cover to handle the Zero escorts, and 2 spares. The attack team, Captain Thomas Lanford Jr., Lieutenant Rex Barber, Lieutenant Besby Holmes, and Lieutenant Raymond Hine. Everything depended on Mitchell's navigation. There was no room for error. No extra fuel, no second chances. They had to get it right the first time. April 18th, 1943. 7:10 a.m. 16 P-38s took off from Guadalcanal's Fighter 2 strip. 2 dropped out with mechanical trouble. The rest spent 2 hours and 20 minutes skimming 50 feet above the ocean, radios off, just compass and clock to guide them. At 9:34, right on schedule, Lieutenant Doug Canning spotted the Japanese formation. 2 Mitsubishi G4M Betty bombers trailed by 6 Zeros above. Mitchell's navigation had been perfect. Captain Lanner and Lieutenant Barber dropped their belly tanks, and started to climb. Then came one of the most picked-apart moments in aviation history. Both pilots later claimed they shot down Yamamoto's bomber. But digging through Japanese records and crash site clues after the war, it's clear Barber's guns did the job. The lead bomber's right engine blew apart. The wings tore off. Yamamoto's plane plunged straight into the jungle canopy of Bougainville. The second bomber, carrying Vice Admiral Igaki, didn't make it either. It crashed in the water. Igaki survived. Somehow, only one P-38 didn't come back. Lieutenant Raymond Hine, last seen with a 0 on his tail, heading out to sea. The impact was instant and unmistakable. April 18, 1943. 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Rabaul, the surviving Zeros, limped home and reported the ambush. At first, Japanese naval headquarters just refused to believe Yamamoto could be dead. But the next day, a search party found the wreckage. Yamamoto's body, thrown clear of the plane, was killed instantly by .50 caliber bullets. Losing Yamamoto hit the Japanese Navy hard. He wasn't just an admiral. He was the face of Japanese naval power. The fact that the Americans could find him, track him, and kill him at exactly the right time and place, it stunned them. It showed them a level of intelligence and operational skill they hadn't even considered possible. Captain Watanabe, who led the recovery team, later reported, the admiral was found still gripping his ceremonial sword. He kept his dignity, even in death. But the precision of the American attack, arriving at exactly the right moment, exactly the right place, shattered our confidence completely. This was the intelligence revolution. After Yamamoto's death, the Japanese Navy had to take the P-38 seriously. A new assessment came out on May 1st, 1943, marked most urgent all units. It spelled out how badly they'd underestimated the Lockheed fighter. They canceled all their earlier assessments. Now, they said, the P-38's top speed was over 400 miles per hour. It could fly above 40,000 feet. With drop tanks, it could cover more than 1,000 miles. Its firepower and climb rate left Japanese fighters behind, especially above 15,000 feet. The warning was clear. Avoid fighting P-38s unless you have a clear advantage. Then came the tactical revolution. In May 1943, the Japanese Navy completely changed the way they fought P-38s. The new orders were blunt. Don't try to climb with them above 20,000 feet. Don't chase them in dives. Only attack if they're tied up escorting bombers or attacking the ground. If they hold the high ground, just break off. This was a full reversal of everything they'd taught before. No more charging with faith alone. The P-38 had forced a new kind of caution. The losses kept piling up. All through 1943, P-38 slaughtered Japanese airpower over the Solomons and New Guinea. Veteran pilots died in droves. American pilots, on the other hand, usually survived being shot down. Rescue teams and the P-38's ability to limp home on one engine made all the difference. For the Japanese, almost every downed pilot was a fatal loss. By September, most of their pre-war aces were gone. Their replacements rushed through training, lacking both skill and experience, and no match for the ever-better American P-38 crews. The numbers tell the story. In 1943, the average Japanese pilot had about 200 flight hours before going into combat. The average American P-38 pilot? Over 400. Survival rates after 10 missions. Japanese, 40%. Americans, 80%. By October 1943, the P-38 showed another advantage. They could escort bombers farther than any Japanese fighter could hope to reach. B-24 Liberators, once easy prey, now struck deep inside the Japanese defensive lines with P-38s by their side the whole way. The math was simple and brutal. Each P-38 could go 1,000 miles with the bombers. The Zero, even with extra fuel, could only manage 600 miles. This meant American bombers could launch raids from bases the Japanese couldn't reach and still have fighter cover the whole time. Then there was Charles Lindbergh. In 1944, he showed up in the Pacific as a civilian technical rep, teaching P-38 pilots new ways to stretch their fuel and fly farther. Some reports say his techniques boosted the P-38's range by as much as 30%. Lindbergh didn't just fly the P-38. He showed everyone just how deadly it could be as a fighter-bomber. He taught pilots how to drop bombs with real accuracy and still keep up the speed and agility of a fighter. That kind of versatility put the Americans even further ahead of the Japanese. And then there was the Marianas Turkey Shoot in June 1944. The Battle of the Philippine Sea made it painfully clear just how much the balance had shifted. Sure, the F-6F Hellcats did most of the dogfighting, but P-38s flying from land bases covered long distances, scouted enemy positions, and helped set up what became a slaughter for Japanese naval aviation. Pilots who escaped said American fighters, P-38s included, just seemed to be everywhere, always higher up, always outnumbering them. Then came the ACE race. In 1944, P-38 pilots in the Pacific started keeping score. The numbers are wild. Major Richard Bong racked up 40 kills, all in P-38s. Major Thomas McGuire, 38. Colonel Charles McDonald, 27. Lieutenant Colonel Gerald Johnson, 22. And these guys did it in about 2 years, more than most Japanese aces managed since the late 1930s. The P-38 wasn't just a fighter anymore. It was an ace factory. By 1945, Japanese naval aviation was basically wiped out. The P-38 and its American counterparts hadn't just shot down planes. They'd wiped out decades of Japanese know-how. After the war, Japanese engineers admitted they totally misunderstood American aircraft design. They didn't get why the P-38 had 2 engines, or why it was built for resilience instead of simplicity. They underestimated the value of firepower, pilot protection, and flexibility. Every feature they thought was too much ended up being exactly what won battles. Let's talk numbers. P-38 shot down over 1,800 Japanese planes in the Pacific, including Admiral Yamamoto's own bomber in 1943. Lockheed built 10,037 P-38s, with production peaking at over 400 a month in 1944. These planes flew more than 65,000 missions, everything from dogfights and escort duty to ground attacks and recon, all for more than 600 miles from base. The Yamamoto mission hit Japan hard. Morale never really recovered, and losing their top strategist proved no one was safe from American reach. When you look at production, Japan just couldn't keep up. They struggled to build 300 to 400 fighters a month, of all types, while Lockheed alone was cranking out over 400 P-38s monthly. Meanwhile, America was mass-producing Mustangs, Thunderbolts, Hellcats, Corsairs, you name it. Each plane rolled off the line with consistent quality and constant upgrades from frontline experience. By comparison, Japanese planes, built with poor materials by conscripted labor, just got worse as the war dragged on. But the real difference was training. In 1944, American P-38 pilots got over 400 hours of training before seeing combat. Japanese pilots? Maybe 100 to 150 hours. Sometimes less than 20 hours in the actual plane they fly. Fuel shortages cut training short, and instructors kept getting sent to the front. So, American pilots showed up ready, learned from veterans, and survived. Japanese rookies barely knew how to fly in formation, and usually didn't last long. The P-38's long range changed everything. Japanese planning documents from 1944 spelled it out. Every move the fleet made had a factor in the P-38's reach. Operating in daylight within P-38 range was a death sentence. By then, that meant most of the Western Pacific. The Japanese Navy simply couldn't move freely, and that changed the whole course of the war. By late 1944, the newer P-38J and L models had fixed every problem pilots had found in combat. The gap just kept getting wider. Better engines, hydraulic ailerons, heated cockpits, dive brakes. The Lightning had it all. It just outclassed everything else. While the Americans kept making the P-38 better, Japan was stuck trying to squeeze a little more life out of the old Zero, with no real resources left to build something truly new. By the time fighters like the N-1K-2J George and Key 84 Frank showed up, it was just too late. They were great planes, but there weren't enough of them, and the war had already moved on. If you want to know what Japanese pilots really thought about the P-38, you don't have to guess. After the war, the survivors told us themselves. Lieutenant Commander Sadamu Kamachi sat down for an interview in 1946 and didn't hold back. We began the war believing our spirit and skill were superior to American materialism. The P-38 proved that properly employed technology defeats spirit. You cannot fight physics with courage. Pretty blunt, right? Captain Teo Tanamo, who survived the war with 32 victories, put another way, the P-38 wasn't the best turning fighter or the fastest or the highest flying, but it was good enough at everything, and it was everywhere. We called them twin-tailed shadows because they seemed to be waiting wherever we flew. Skip ahead to 1962. At a U.S.-Japanese aviation symposium, veterans from both sides got together to talk about the P-38's legacy. Former Captain Minoru Gender, now a member of Parliament, didn't sugarcoat it. The P-38 was the first clear signal that we had fundamentally misunderstood modern war. When it killed Admiral Yamamoto, it killed more than a man. It killed our entire concept of warfare. We thought wars were won by superior warriors. The Americans proved wars are won by superior systems. John Mitchell, who led the Yamamoto mission, summed up the American angle. We couldn't build a fighter that could outturn a Zero, so we built one that didn't need to. That's the American way. If you can't win their game, change the game entirely. And then there was the 1985 reunion in Hawaii. Kenji Yanaga, who'd once flown escort for Admiral Yamamoto, stood up and said what everyone else had been thinking for decades. We dismissed your P-38 in 1942 because we measured it by our standards. We valued elegance. You valued effectiveness. We sought perfection in one dimension. You sought adequacy in all dimensions. We built the ultimate sword. You built a gun that made swords irrelevant. The killing of Admiral Yamamoto was not just a successful mission. It was a demonstration. The message was that America could reach anywhere, strike anyone with an aircraft we had dismissed as impossible. But the greatest lesson was this. The P-38 taught us that modern war is not about individual excellence, but about systems. Not about warrior spirit, but about industrial capacity. Not about elegant solutions, but about practical ones. We laughed at the P-38 in 1942. By April 18, 1943, it had killed our greatest admiral. By 1944, it owned our skies. The laughter stopped forever when we realized we were not fighting pilots. We were fighting an entire industrial system that could produce quality and quantity. To the men who flew the Lightning, you didn't just win a war. You changed how wars would be fought forever. And that's really the point. Numbers tell the story. When Admiral Yamamoto died on April 18, 1943, it wasn't just a brilliant strategist lost. That was the day Japanese naval aviation's fate was sealed. The P-38 showed that American intelligence, planning, and technology could reach across an ocean and hit with pinpoint accuracy. Those 16 Lightnings that took off from Guadalcanal weren't just loaded with guns and fuel. They carried a message. The age of industrial warfare was here. From that moment, wars would go to the side that could build better weapons faster, train pilots in batches, and use technology smarter. Think about it. In November 1942, Japanese officers laughed at those weird, twin-boom P-38s landing on Guadalcanal. By April 1943, those same planes had killed their most important leader. By 1945, P-38s flew over Japan with barely any opposition. The change was absolute. The Japanese had mocked complexity, only to discover it meant sophistication. They sneered at excess, only to find it was abundance. They thought the P-38 was too American, too big, too mechanical. Turns out, that's exactly what made it perfect for the kind of war America was fighting. 5 months of laughter. Decades of consequences. The P-38 Lightning didn't just shoot down Admiral Yamamoto. It shot down an entire philosophy of warfare. In modern conflict, the assembly line beats the sword, the slide rule beats the warrior spirit, and industrial math wins out over individual courage. They kept laughing at the Lightning, right up until it knocked Yamamoto out of the sky. After that, The only thing you could hear was a steady drone of those twin Allison engines, American power reaching out wherever wanted, whenever it felt like striking. The lightning didn't just strike, it changed everything. The samurai era was done. Now it was America's turn. 16 P-38s took off from Guadalcanal, flew 435 miles with nothing but compass and clock, nailed their target within a minute of the plan, finished the job in under 10 minutes of combat, and made it back, losing just one plane. That's not luck. That's not a fluke. That's what happens when planning, training, and technology all come together, just like they were meant to. Back in November 1942, Japanese commanders scoffed at the P-38. Turns out, modern war doesn't care if you laugh. They learn the hard way. Different doesn't mean weak. Complicated doesn't mean soft. And you probably shouldn't laugh at the future, especially when it comes roaring in on twin engines, loaded with American firepower and a clear purpose. In the end, the P-38 Lightning got the last laugh. Its echo rolled across the Pacific, all the way to August 15th, 1945, when the rising sun finally set.